Saturday night, 7 p.m. Indiana faces off against Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. Ohio State is favored by 4 points currently. Should be an absolute dogfight. These teams have been number 1 and number 2 in the rankings for weeks and weeks now, and they've deserved it. They've looked every bit the part of the number 1 and number 2 team in the country. And so now we finally get to see on the field how these two teams stack up and who really should be the number 1 team in the country. I can't wait. Should be cinema. Y'all's thoughts on this game, though?
Yeah, there's 6 rematches this weekend. This is one of the few that aren't a rematch of a game this season. Indiana, Ohio State somehow did not play each other this year, and it has been a big contention point with these Big Ten and SEC and also ACC schedules, especially ACC, that none of these teams have played each other, and so it's really hard to have your head-to-heads. And so you get to the point where you're in the conference championship, and now the number 1 team and the number 2 team in the country, which this is just the 3rd time ever that a number 1 and number 2 team will face off for a conference championship. The last time was when Florida and Bama faced off in the Georgia Dome. Funny enough, Kurt Signetti was a part of that. He was on the Bama staff for that game, so he is part of that history. Bama ended up beating Tim Tebow in the Georgia Dome that year. For Indiana, I just want to put into perspective how quickly a thought process has changed, and the fact that it has changed this much is unbelievably insane. It is diabolical. Indiana, prior to Kurt Signetti, had 0 12-win seasons, 0 11-win seasons, 0 10-win seasons. That's 0 double-digit seasons. They've had 2 9-win seasons ever, 1967 and 1945. They have had 61 losing seasons in their history of their football program, and they have had 5 double-digit loss seasons. Now with Kurt Signetti, they've had 2 straight playoff berths. They are 23-2, and they have a potential Heisman Trophy winner at quarterback. They also have risen to the number 2 power ranking for a lot of Vegas, Josh Pate, any of those. Last year they were frauds, and now they are the consensus number 2 team in the country with 2 ranked wins this year over Oregon and Illinois, both top 10, one on the road at Oregon, the other at home. Last year, when they were frauds, they only played 2 ranked games, both of which are on the road, and both losses to the teams that played for the national title, Ohio State in the regular season and the playoff game against Notre Dame. So maybe that Indiana team wasn't as fraudulent last year as you compare them to this year's team, and I think that could be a compelling argument as well. But regardless, Indiana has turned quickly into a very dominant program, and it is something to talk about in the offseason, but it'll be curious to see, do they continue that? I would fully expect it with the Kurt Signetti extension, maybe not to this kind of level because they have had to rely on these past 2 years on transfer quarterbacks in Curtis Rourke and Fernando Mendoza, and they more than likely will have to again unless Alberto Mendoza is going to be a star. Jury's still out on that one. But for this game specifically, Indiana, I think it comes down to one side of the ball, because on the other side of the ball, there's one argument that can be made, and if that argument is true, it does not matter. And I'll go ahead and make that one. Ohio State's offense versus Indiana's defense. If Julian Sayin is able to hit deep pass plays over the top to Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate, and they're able to run the ball like they did with Bo Jackson, and they're able to go on a 12-minute drive that ends up resulting in a field goal in a game, it will not matter. But if they are slightly slowed, then Indiana has a chance, and they only have a chance at that point, which is funny and crazy to say in a matchup between the number 2 and number 1 team in the country. But Indiana offensively has to produce. They are 9th in total yards this season with 466 per game. They are the 9th best rushing offense in the country, 223.6 per game. They are 50th in passing yards at 242. Offensively, I'll go and I'm going to name all the playmakers because, quite frankly, I don't think many people have watched Indiana games this year outside of the Oregon game and the very end of the Penn State game because it was close. And the same for Ohio State. No one's really watched these Big Ten teams play a ton of games because they haven't played a ton of high-profile games. And so you don't know the teams like you know Georgia and you know Bama and you know Texas A&M. You know all of those teams. And you know their playmakers and their best players and their quarterbacks and their coaches. You don't necessarily know that for Indiana and Ohio State. For Indiana, they're led by Fernando Mendoza, who proclaims all glory to God every single time he has an interview. It is one of his best characteristics. He also has been, people have claimed that he is built by an AI, given the way he answers some questions as well.
Or that he reads off a prompter. I've seen
Yes,
accusations of that.
That as well. Look, I'd also argue the way he answers interviews doesn't sound much different than Ty Simpson. Ty Simpson also praises all glory to God, but he also has those kind of responses. His interview, go watch his interview after the Iron Bowl. It looks no different than it does for Mendoza this year. Sadly, both of their careers are over after this season, as one of them is guaranteed to be the Jets quarterback, and the other one is more than likely guaranteed to be a Browns quarterback. And I think their careers are over, sadly.
Sure.
So enjoy them while they still last. And Fernando Mendoza has been great this year. He has 32 touchdowns through the air, 5 picks, and then 6 rushing touchdowns. For Indiana, they have the 9th best rushing offense. They rely on 3 backs, really 2, but they have a third in Kobe Martin they will use. It's Roman Hemby and it's Kalen Black. Roman Hemby has 866 yards on the ground this year with 6 touchdowns. Kalen Black, 737 touchdowns. Kobe Martin, though, has also had 6 touchdowns and 450 rushing yards. They aren't your typical backs that you can rely on in the passing game. In fact, they only have 17 catches all year, those 3 backs combined, which is actually kind of insane. You don't expect Indiana to set up the screen game, which is something, if they start doing it, maybe they've saved it for some reason, or they just realize that we haven't relied on our backs, and so Ohio State doesn't plan for the screen game. And maybe you can set that up. When we get into Ohio State, I might argue that wouldn't even work. They also have a dynamic duo of receivers in Omar Cooper Jr. and Elijah Surratt. Cooper Jr. has 58 catches for 800 yards and 11 touchdowns. And Surratt has 48 catches, 650, and 11 touchdowns. They have been big playmaker guys. They are not guys that just have 7 catches and 80 yards every game. No, one of them usually pops off for 10 catches and 140 yards and 2 touchdowns, and then the other has a quiet day. So which one will get the explosive day against Ohio State? Explosive in this game, though, may be 6 yards or 6 catches for 60 yards and a touchdown, given how good this defense is for Ohio State. And they are full of monsters. I'm not even going to read the stats. Go look at their stats. They are insane. They are all basically top 3 in pretty much every single category. But they have guys that are going to be stars when they get to the NFL, and that is Arvo Reese, who is a consensus top 3 pick. Some are arguing the number 1 overall pick. Sonny Styles Jr., Central Michigan legend, would be the best linebacker on every team in the country, but maybe 2. Texas, you could argue with Anthony Hill Jr., and then Ohio State. He's only worse than Arvo Reese. This guy is also a first-round pick. It is the best linebacker pair in the country. Joel Klatt's going to say that 7 or 6 times on the broadcast, I'd argue. Caleb Downs, I haven't even mentioned, which to mention him third is insane. But he has been elite since he was a freshman at Alabama. He's a consensus top 10 pick. They also have Caden McDonald, a first-round defensive tackle who plays the nose. Who is a nose tackle. He'll play right over the center, which can be a problem. Imagine a first-round defensive tackle who's 320 pounds bearing you down. You have to snap the ball and then immediately go to block him. It can be trouble for Indiana center. And then Caden Curry, who is their best edge rusher. I will say He is worse than pretty much all of their pass rushers in their history. But they've also had the Bosas, Chase Young, Jack Sawyer most recently. They have had elite pass rushers. He is not that, but he can still be a game breaker. And then for their corners, specifically Davidson, Igbinosa. He has great traits. He's going to be a draft pick. In this game, will he struggle with PI calls? I think is something to look at. He has struggled with that in his career and had some pretty bad PI moments where he has just tackled receivers because he wasn't able to cover them correctly. Can he cover and play well against Omar Cooper and Elijah Surratt? But with all those playmakers for Indiana offensively, they've got one to try to run the football somehow and pick up yards against two of the best linebackers in the country and an elite defensive tackle. If they're able to find some kind of rushing threat, then maybe they're able to be in some favorable passing situations. But for the most part, I fully expect them to be in 3rd and 7+ a lot this game, which means Fernando Mendoza and those two receivers have to be really, really good. And that is the key to it. I think if Mendoza turns the ball over, this game might be over. Bryce Underwood struggled extremely against Ohio State. Didn't break 100 passing yards. I think Mendoza does. But it is a huge key to this one. If they can get some kind of passing attack, they might have a chance. But again, like I said, Ohio State, if they can hit Jeremiah Smith, just another elite receiver, and Carnell Tate, it may not matter. And it is crazy to think that 1 versus 2, only a 4-point spread, 4.5 in some places, to feel like it's such a big overmatch is crazy. But Indiana has a chance to really, really throw as Josh Pate would say, a crowbar in the bicycle spokes. If they are competitive in this game, if they outright win this game, it opens up the whole book to really, I'd argue, 11. For sure, though, 10 of the teams that are in the playoff could win the national championship.
It's crazy that if Indiana wins this, you don't just immediately assume that they are the dominant team that they've played like all season. Why not?
I feel like they can still get stumped.
Okay.
Because I think there are many teams that are right there on Indiana's level. But this is our first chance to see Ohio State against a team with really a remote chance to potentially beat them. And I think it could be a huge statement if Indiana's able to do it. Then, okay, if Georgia plays Ohio State, they can do it. Oregon, A&M, Notre Dame, Alabama have a chance. And I think you'd argue for much of the public perception that with all those teams, they would feel like those teams have a better chance in those games already. So if Indiana does it, it could open up the door for all those teams to feel like they have a chance. At the same time, it's scary because if Ohio State loses this game, it does not matter. Their season's not over.
Yeah.
And so that means they have to lose again. And I don't know if you see another loss for Ohio State.
One thing that I will be looking for going into the season is can Indiana capitalize on opportunities? That's one thing Michigan failed to do is they go down, get in the red zone. I think in the red zone, but they kick. They get down and they go kick a field goal, right? You get an opponent's possession, an opponent's side of the field, and you're not able to capitalize and get a touchdown and take a field goal. Julian Sayin, second play of the game, throws that pick. You get another field goal. In the second quarter, you get another field goal. Those are 3 drives where if you're able to capitalize on opportunities, on being able to drive down the field or, getting that turnover and you score touchdowns, you go into halftime up 21-17. It's an entirely different ball game. Instead, you don't score for the second half, and maybe you don't score for the second half if, either way. But it's just Indiana's got to be able to capitalize on those opportunities in ways that Michigan did not. And I think Indiana is much more suited and equipped to capitalize on those opportunities than Michigan was. And so that'll be something I'm watching for is if Julian Sayin comes out and throws a pick or 2, or if there's a muff punt, one of those things. And we talked about it like with Texas Tech and BYU. If Indiana gets a little bit of luck that goes their way, they then have to capitalize on that luck because luck will only get you so far. You have to then finish it. And then another thing I'll be looking at is can Indiana's defense? I think Indiana's defense is really good. So I've run some calculations. Like I look at like relative performance. So how you do relative offensively, how many points per game are you scoring relative to how many points that team allows? And so on average, Indiana scores 18 more points per game than teams allow or would be expected to allow given every other one of their performance. That's second in the country. But defensively, they're fifth. They're right up there. They hold teams on average 14 points below expected, below average. That's right there. It's right behind Oklahoma. It's right ahead of Iowa and Oregon. Ohio State is only 3 points better at holding teams 17 points below average. So I think that there's a real opportunity there. Ohio State's offense ranks 14th. They score below 10 points per game more than expected. So I think there's a real opportunity there for if Indiana's defense can create those opportunities for the offense. Because I do think Ohio State's defense is so good. Indiana's going to throw a lot of shots at the dartboard. They're going to need to maximize possessions where they're in that game. And that's where the defense really comes into play. Because if the defense gets down 14-0, and then Ohio State can start to create those long drives, or Indiana starts to look at the logo and feel like they can't win, which I don't think a Curt Cignetti team would ever do, but it's always a possibility in these high-profile matchups where one team is the program underdog as well as the spread underdog. I think that it's really important that Indiana's defense give the offense as many opportunities as possible where we've got a game on our hands, because I think that's going to be really important.
Yeah. They almost have to in my eyes. It's a playmaker defense, kind of what you just talked about. They have to go make plays. They have the best turnover margin per game, in the country at 1.7. They win the turnover margin by an average of 1.7 a game, and they're going to need that. And then capitalizing the red zone, like you said, is a key point. Sanders, is just interesting that they are definitely better equipped than Michigan is, but it's still not even an advantage for them. If they go get in the red zone, I almost still don't necessarily expect them to score a touchdown, because as good as Ohio State's defense is just in general, they're elite in the red zone. Mm-hmm. They don't let teams get easy points. You're going to have to go earn it, and so that's just going to be interesting to watch. I'm excited. Really all I want to do, I don't even really care about the Ohio State offense versus the Indiana defense. I know it does matter. I just talked about it. But I just want to watch the Indiana offense face off against the Ohio State defense and see how that goes.
Absolutely.
Because it should just be an absolute treat to watch.
Yeah, Ohio State's only given up 9 touchdowns this year, and we've seen Indiana at least play a playoff caliber team at Oregon so far this year. And Mendoza wasn't excellent. He threw a pick 6 in that game. That very well could happen again. But when he did throw that pick 6, after they threw that pick 6, they drove right back down the field and ended up scoring a touchdown of their own, retaking the lead. And it was in a large part and reason Indiana won that game. I didn't mean to at least discredit Indiana's defense. They are very, very high caliber. And we have also seen a matchup for them against the playoff caliber team in Oregon. Like I said, Dante Moore struggled a lot. He only had 186 passing yards. He had 2 picks in that game. And Oregon only ran for 80 yards as a team. That could very well happen to Ohio State. But I think the fear is there that has been kind of brought up for multiple weeks is, has Ohio State been pulling punches? Have they been avoiding showing their best stuff? Pate talked about it, but I think other people have as well, that maybe Ohio State still hasn't played their A-plus game yet, their best game yet, and that is a tremendous fear. They are a sleeping giant that if they are as good as they seem that they are, that it will not matter for anyone. And I think that's a huge fear going into a game like this and then each of the games in the playoff for Indiana and Ohio State. But we can get into picking this one. It'll be a potential aura fest between Curt Cignetti and Ryan Day. Ryan Day claiming after the Michigan game that we want to win with humility. He should turn on the tape after the Notre Dame game that he won, winning with humility there. Also, with the way he reacted after they won the national championship, where he was very bombardment bombarding, I should say, not bombardment, bombarding, and tooting his own horn a ton when he failed to beat Michigan that year. On the other side, Kurt Cignetti is a walking aura fest. He will try to give every line possible. Very, very interested to see his pregame interview right before they start the game. He is one that is at least delivered on those. I remember one in which Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss, they played at Alabama when Saban was still there. I think it was either 3 or 4 years ago, and it was on CBS. And right before the game, he does his pregame interview, and he says, "Get your popcorn ready." And then that was the only answer he gave to any question, and ran off. And Ole Miss got blasted in that game. Will Kurt Cignetti have a similar story? I hope not. But it very well could happen where he says something like Ohio State hasn't played this team.
It sounds like the Vanderbilt guy who's like, Alabama, when you play us, you can learn how to play SEC ball.
Yes.
You're next. And it's like, well, I mean, technically we are next on their schedule.
I hope that doesn't happen in this game. And then also for the quarterbacks, I think a lot of people are arguing, we didn't discuss this in this preview, but they're playing for the Heisman Trophy between the two of them, which is insane to say. That we're having a 1 versus 2. We're also having the Heisman Trophy and a Big Ten championship all on the line in one game. And yet this still, for a lot of people in the media and in the public, specifically Twitter, have said this is the least compelling 1 versus 2 matchup ever. I don't feel that way. I'm really compelled. I can't wait to watch this. I'm really excited this year.
Maybe because it's the lowest the stakes ever been, because traditionally when 1 versus 2 happens not in the BCS championship, it's for an opportunity to play for the championship.
And the season's over for the loser.
Yeah, that might be the only argument you could make.
I think that's a fair argument, but I also still think there's a lot that's still out there on the table for these two. I'm really excited that this year Gus Johnson and Joe Klatt are on the call. Fox, as they should be, because CBS and Fox are flipping each year for the Big Ten for who does the championship. So I'm ready for another Gus Johnson moment. Does he lose his voice again after a Fernando Mendoza play?
I hope so.
We'll see. That being said, I picked Indiana to beat Oregon earlier this year. I just had a feeling that they were playing better football than them. I don't feel that way for this game. I'm going to pick against Indiana. I think Ohio State wins, and I think they cover. They are rightfully the number 1 team in the country and have been all year. And I feel that way in this game as well. I think they'll go out there and win the Big Ten championship. That being said, I will be cheering for Indiana because who doesn't love cheering for the underdog?
Yeah. I'll go ahead and go next. I went ahead and put my pick up there. Just in case JP picked Indiana, I wanted 0 accusations and me just tailing him for the sake of our pick 'em. I'll be picking Indiana to win and cover and win, whatever that order goes in. I'm so excited for this matchup. I think that this is a level. I think that I'm not going to say talent-wise because, all the stars and the recruiting would point to Ohio State, but Indiana is playing like a team that is on Ohio State's level of talent. And I think the coaching job that Kurt Cignetti and the way he's went and found the guys who didn't have the stars next to their names and they're playing like 4 and 5 stars, they're playing like blue chips. I think that's been awesome. And I do think that this is going to be a great matchup, but I think Indiana is going to win. Super excited to see that. And it'll be a great validation for me if it happens because I've had them ranked number 1, I believe, since the Oregon win. And I try to do my rankings primarily resume-based, but I do think that Indiana has the on-field play to back up the resume they have with that win at Oregon, the undefeated record, all that. I can't wait. Where is it, JP? You said earlier.
It's in Indianapolis.
Okay. But I imagine it will not be hopefully close to 50-50 given that Indiana.
Maybe.
I don't think it'll be in Indiana's favor at all, but I imagine it could get close to 50-50.
The problem will be for many is just people, true fans of each team, which of course I think it'll be 50-50, but the true diehard fans are going to get left out in this game because the lowest ticket you can buy right now is $650.
That's very fair. And I
Before
imagine
fees.
that there's Ohio State has a lot more fans or wealthy fans, or people who are just like, oh, I'm just going to go to the game because it's a great matchup, and I'm going to cheer for Ohio State because it's Ohio State.
They're also like the Yankees in that everyone's a Ohio State fan.
Yeah.
They're one of those teams.
Yep. Well, I can't wait to see it. Jack, your pick. I mean, I feel like I know who you're going to pick. Cause
I wonder if LeBron's going to be there. So just something to think about. I got Ohio State. I'm not going to back
not
down
during the season.
They don't play that night, and then they're in Philly Sunday.
Oh, okay, maybe.
So there's a chance. And I think they're in Boston before that. So kind of in the area. I doubt he's there, but he's an Ohio State guy apparently. I'm going to take Ohio State. I just think they're the best team in the country. It's only a 4-point spread. I'm going to take who I think the best team in the country is to cover the 4-point spread. I think they have way more avenues to win this game than Indiana does. Stuff happens. It's college football. But I'm going to ride with the Buckeyes, and I don't really care who wins, to be honest.